All right, all right, all right. Here we are. Hey, it's a Monday night. We're at 3900 Highway 35, just north, a few minutes north of Lindsay. Okay, so we got everyone here, and we have our friend Doug Forrest. I'm going to start off with blowing the shofar. All right. David. No. Doug's honey. Sure. Okay. Oh, we know it's a war, it's a spiritual war, and we're going to blow that shofar, and that's what we do here. And we won already, see? All right, here we go. Victory! Victory is ours, right? That's right, hey. All right, glory to King. So, hey, we're going to open up in prayer, and we're going to ask the Creator to be here. All right, dear Father, we praise your holy name, the name of Yeshua HaMashiach Jesus Christ. Father, come in this room. We have the spirit of truth in here. We love you. We thank you for bringing the truth out and exposing those devils, the evil ones, Father. We thank you for this, and we give you all glory. Hallelujah. Amen. Okay. All right, so as we, I know we're a little behind today, and but you know what? It's just beautiful weather, and something happens. You know, when you turn around and the heat gets in, and we start fellowshipping and getting together with other people. It's just lovely. What we're going to do, we're going to start off, right, with Doug Forrest, but I want to say that next week we're going to get into dealing with controlled opposition and shills and the whole thing about the anatomy of a shill and how they will infiltrate. And you'll know you're getting closer to the truth when this happens. So first they get all funny on you and everything like that. They get pissed off, and you know there is a whole process about this, and we need to know how that works. Know that there's a blocking mechanism. Just get it out of your life. There's so much negativity out there. Stay with the love of the truth. That's what it is. It's the love of the truth. So we want to thank the Most High. We want to thank this whole thing, that this is what's happening. And knowing that, you will be attacked. And it's just going to happen. You know, that's how it's going to happen here. Like, Doug's going to tell you a lot of issues that, what's been not being out there. And, it's myths. I tell you, there's so many myths out there. And usually what happens is that you agree to it and you're silent about all of this. And that's what all happens. Like, it's called acquiesce. When someone says something about you, it's all negative and it sends it all out there, and you don't respond or you don't just stop it or rebut. Like, what happens is that they take it as truth. This happens when you go into the courts. Same thing. If you don't say or respond, and they do, 3 times. There's something about a magic number 3. And if you don't, then you agree to everything that they have done to you, or said against you, or hey, maybe it's good, hopefully it is, but you know what, usually it's not. All right. Okay, so now we have our friend Doug Forrest, and it's called The Myth is Canada. And you're going to find out a lot of myths, a lot of things you thought it was true, but are not. All right, so hey, let's put our hands together for Doug Forrest. Hey, welcome aboard.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking at the opposition, they have a rule book, believe it or not, written by a gentleman by the name of Saul Alinsky, and it's called Rules for Radicals. I suggest that if you're going up against the opposition, that you read that book and use their rules against them. It's called Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. How famous is this book? Well, Hillary Clinton wrote her dissertation on that in order to get her law degree. Yeah, so talk about a card-carrying communist. There's one there. That's 100%. But yeah, you need to write that down. Once again, that's Saul Alinsky, and it's called Rules for Radicals. said, I'm Doug Forrest from the Myth is Canada, and tonight we're going to get into a little bit of a history lesson, and I thought we would start somewhere in the neighborhood of 1864 through about 1867. You know, the Articles of Confederation that don't exist, that they like to call the Constitution Act 1867 that doesn't exist. But we're going to learn how that came about, because in 1865, a group of people from what was known as Upper and Lower Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick went over to England to meet with, what was his name?
Like King George III.
No, they went to meet with the Secretary for the Colonies, Earl of Carnarvon, okay, in 1864. And with them, they brought a bill called the Kingdom of Canada Bill. I'm just going to read you a quote. This is from, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Russell Rogers Smith. He wrote a few books, Ho Canada, Inside Canada, and Alberta has the right to its own sovereign credit. No? You can go to the website at www.themythiscanada.com or .ca, and I have all of Russell's books up there. I have all the books, what's his name, Walter Cool's books are up there as well. You can download that, and Walter Cool's famous letter to René Lévesque. It's up there. Yeah, so I suggested some really good reading. Russell Rogers Smith died in 1968, and his book, Ho Canada, was published in 1965. It does a lot of coverage of what took place, but this comes from his book. The debate on the Quebec resolutions, October 10th, 1864, in the legislature of Upper and Lower Canada ended by ratification on March 13th, 1865. Immediately, the Imperial Parliament countered the move by enacting the Colonial Laws Validity Act, June 29, 1865, to show the colonists that it was they and not the colonial legislature that had the power to govern. Revising the draft and briefing the Quebec resolutions in the form of a bill called the Kingdom of Canada Bill, John A. Macdonald and delegates from Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick presented these to the Earl of Carnarvon, Secretary for the Colonies, on December the 26th, 1966. Instead of bluntly refusing, the Earl of Carnarvon delegated Lord Ring, Parliamentary Secretary, to the Treasury to draft the bill to conform as much as possible to the Kingdom of Canada draft, but to nullify its purpose and give the authority of the Governor General to act as a dictator. John A. Macdonald got a wife, a title, a membership on Her Majesty's Imperial Privy Council. Canada got the British North American Act letters packed, and the Governor General is a dictator. John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, was a traitor to the people of Canada and threw them under the bus to get the BNA Act along with the Governor General. Now, the first time the BNA Act was enacted in 1867, it was taken and read once in the House of Lords. What was interesting is it had this on the cover. I'm going to show that to the camera first. Show it to you people over here. Now, this was the cover. So they read that one reading through House of Lords, and before they sent it to the House of Commons, they took this page off. Why? Because this page, if you can see down here, it says, by reason of request of the colonies and for a federal government. Okay, that's why they put that there, because that's what the Kingdom of Canada Bill wanted.
Interesting.
So they made it look like the Kingdom of Canada Bill. And they took this off. They went to the House of Commons. They never printed the document. This is, by the way, the entire BNA Act. They never printed it. They simply stood for 3 days for one reading and read all 147 sections through on the record for 3 times in the House of Commons. At which point it went on once to the House of Lords, 3 times to the House of Commons, from the House of Commons to the Court of Chancery for royal assent, from royal assent onto the Court of St. James, where Queen Victoria bestowed her first letters patent on her first Governor General to the corporation sole known as the Dominion of Canada. And so, very interesting. But it was a pain in the ass, excuse my language, that they had to, every time they had to replace the Governor General of Canada, they had to go through the same process. One reading through the House of Lords, 3 readings through the House of Commons, off to the Court of Chancery for royal assent, up to the Court of St. James for Queen Victoria to bestow upon her next Governor General her letters patent for him to take his seat in the corporation sole known as the Dominion of Canada. So what did they do instead? 1878, hold it for the camera first, they created the Letters Patent Revocation Act. 1867 Constitution Act? No. They're lying to you. This is not a constitution, for it constitutes nothing. Also, they're lying to you. This is not Confederation documents. They're not Articles of Confederation. They are what? They are letters patent, period. And the Letters Patent Revocation Act created a commission so that every time a Governor General would be replaced, he'd bring his letters patent back to the commission and turn them in. They'd take the cover letter off, write a new cover letter, and hand them on to the next Governor General that would then go back to Canada and take his place as the Government of Canada. Now this act, 1878, okay, stopped the having to go through and reenact. So, okay, that's wonderful. That made my life easier. And they also, in section 9 of this act, this is a very important section, section 9 said, because people will say, well, and we do hereby reserve to ourselves, our heirs and successors, full power and authority from time to time to revoke, alter, or amend these our letters patent, as to us or them shall seem meet. Okay? Heirs and successors. There it is. Section 9 of this little obscure act. It took me forever to find this act, by the way. It was well hidden. We didn't want to do that. So, in 1890. So in 1893, they repealed certain sections of the DNA. And the two that I'll cover tonight, the first one is the enacting clause. In other words, by removing the enacting clause, be it therefore enacted and declared by the Queen's most excellent majesty, by and with the advice and consent of Lord Spiritual Temporal Commons, in this present Parliament assembled, and by authority of the same as follows. It's called an enacting clause. It was repealed. It was removed. Why? Because they needed to lock the document. In other words, make it unamendable. Why? Because it wasn't necessary. Everything that was in here, and that's all they needed to do. And so they locked the document. And then the second thing that they repealed was section 2. Applications of provisions referring to the Queen. The provisions of this act referring to Her Majesty the Queen extend also to heirs and successors of Her Majesty Kings and Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Section 9 of the 1878 Act, Letters Patent Revocation Act, have heirs and successors. So they repealed it from this act. They didn't need it. It becomes superfluous. By the way, let me just, section 12, I love section 12 of this act, because people try to argue with me about this. And I've had attorneys, oh, Daddy. And I'm like, really, let's look at section 12. All powers under acts to be exercised by the Governor General with the advice of the Privy Council or alone. advice of the Privy Council. Advice to be taken or not. What it's really saying is this is a dictatorship. And who is the government of Canada? The Governor General, period. There is no argument beyond that. Sadly, this document died in 1931. It did. Because along with it, the Statute of Westminster was created. Now, how did the Statute of Westminster come about? Well, in the 1920s and 1930s, the late 1917s, if you remember at that time, there was a world war. Oh, I should go back. Let's go back to 1867. Why would they want letters patent and a Governor General for the Dominion of Canada and not allow Canada to go off on its own through the Quebec Resolution? Why would they do that? Well, I don't know if you remember, but there was this little war of northern aggression from the United States, where the U.S. said to their southern people that you're going to sell cotton to our northern people at a much cheaper rate, or we're going to tax the hell out of you when you export it. And they said no, so the war of northern aggression took place. And guess who backed the South? The British Empire backed the South. And guess who lost? The South. And guess who owed the American government a few $1 million? I think it was $3.8 million because they sank a bunch of ships. So they needed to secure the land here in Canada, and they needed to, they went ahead and they did Rupert's Land Act and the Deed of Surrender on the Hudson's Bay Charter, etc. I'm not going to get too deeply into that tonight, but they needed to do that. That gave them Western Canada from Manitoba on to British Columbia and the Northwest Territories, etc., etc. But here's the kicker. John A. Macdonald, Sir John A. Macdonald, decided, he was on the, don't forget, Queen's Privy Council. That's where he got his seat. Not on the Privy Council for Canada, but on the Queen's Privy Council for England. And he negotiated, on behalf of the British Empire, a little treaty called the Washington Treaty 1871. Now, the Washington Treaty 1871 created the 49th parallel from Ontario all the way up to British Columbia, 49th parallel. But here's the kicker. On all the Great Lakes, including all the locks and everything else, and the Niagara Falls and the St. Lawrence Seaway, John A. Macdonald said in the treaty he negotiated for us that the Americans have free access to this in perpetuity forever, and that the Canadian people will pay for all of the services, etc., that are needed to keep the seaway open and to keep the locks and everything else going. That we will pay for it, but the Americans have free access in perpetuity. Thank you, Sir John A. Macdonald. Once again, that little traitor bastard threw us under the bus in perpetuity. And by the way, who paid the $3.8 million to the U.S. government for the British Empire sinking the ships? Well, that would have been the Canadian people once again. And who paid the Hudson's Bay Company for the use of land off of their charter? Well, once again, the Dominion of Canada, we the people paid for that. The British Empire washed their hands very clearly, but they took control of it. How nice of it. So anyways, let's move forward into the early 1910s. Don't forget we had the First World War. Terrible, terrible, terrible. But once again, a banker's war. Second World War, bankers' war. The Third World War coming is going to be another bankers' war. And so the British Empire, actually, Germany in 14 or 15, said to the British Empire, we're going to just stop the war here. We're going to pack up. We're going to move back to our country, leave the borders where they were with France and Belgium and everything else, and we're just going to end it here now. And we'll sign a peace treaty, paying reparations, etc., if necessary, and we're going to call it quits. And the British Empire said no. No. Because we got the Americans and they're going to come into the war. And the Zionists in America talked the American president into joining the war because the deal that the Zionists made with the English Empire and Lord Balfour was that Lord Balfour would give them a declaration to have, don't forget, Palestine in the Middle East, the British Empire was in Palestine. And they promised to turn Palestine over to the Zionists for the nation state of Israel. So, which is why the war continued and several million people lost their lives because of that. But what it also did, bankrupted the British Empire. And so the British Empire was holding these secret imperial conferences. I believe they started in 1917, 1919, 1923, and then the more important one here is the 1926 Imperial Conference. Why is this one important? Because Lord Balfour wrote the minutes to this, and the minutes to this particular Imperial Conference were called the Balfour Declaration, 1926. And what was interesting about that is that this was included in those minutes. What is this? This is the Native Sons of Canada resolutions from Assembly number 2. And this was done in September. Now, who are the Native Sons of Canada? Well, the leader of that group was a little guy called Russell Rogers Smith. And it was him that wrote up these minutes. And he gave these minutes to William Lyon Mackenzie King, who was Prime Minister of Canada at that time in October of 1926. William Lyon Mackenzie King took these minutes over to and gave them to Lord Balfour at the Secret Imperial Conference in 1926. Lord Balfour included them in the minutes of the Balfour Declaration. Really important. Why? Because in 1930, they held the last Secret Imperial Conference. And in those minutes, the Balfour Declaration was included. Now, the Balfour Declaration, along with those minutes, were given to a commission in Great Britain to write this lovely little 11-section document called the Statute of Westminster. Now, what's interesting about this document is all 3 sections that apply to Canada came from the Native Sons of Canada minutes that were included in the Balfour Declaration. So Russell Rogers Smith and his people ensured that the Statute of Westminster ended the Dominion of Canada. Made sure it did. Section 11. There was so funny. In 1946, William Lyon Mackenzie King got a hold of George Barr, who was King's Counsel in Ottawa, and he sent him with a stenographer to depose Russell Rogers Smith. Why? Well, according to William Lyon Mackenzie King, how screwed are we? Because it was Russell Rogers Smith and the Native Sons of Canada and the clauses that were in the Statute of Westminster, he knew exactly what they meant. So he went down to depose them to find out exactly what it all meant. And the big one here was Section 11. So notwithstanding anything in Interpretations Act 1889, the expression colony shall not, in any act of Parliament of the United Kingdom passed after the commencement of this act, include a dominion or any province or state forming part of a dominion. Now, George Barr asked Russell, what does that mean? And Russell's response was, as there is no intermediate status between that of a colony and a sovereign state, and any province of Canada is no longer a colony, they must of necessity be sovereign states as they come within the requirements set forth in section 11. What does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? That means that the province of Ontario is but one thing: the sovereign nation of Ontario, as the sovereign nation of Manitoba, the sovereign nation of Alberta, the sovereign nation of Saskatchewan, etc., etc., etc. Now, what's interesting is also December 11th, 1931, is when the Statute of Westminster came into force and effect. The United Kingdom, in December of 1931, recalled their Governor General and said in the future, no department of government of the United Kingdom is concerned in any way with the appointment of another, meaning another Governor General. And that comes from file number 624-30, Department of State for External Affairs. On the record, the Congress, or of the constitutional monarchy that they have in the UK, said we're never going to send another Governor General. You remember that. Yeah, you know. I didn't bring it. I have some money from that timeline. So in 1931, December of 1931, and January of 1932, et cetera, the powers that be in Ottawa said, change, the Dominion lives on. Really? Not joking. They knew that the Dominion ended and that what was supposed to happen, send them to a constitutional convention to write a constitution to create a constitutional monarchy for what would then become Canada, a sovereign nation. But the Mandarins, what I call the Mandarins, or the parasites, or powers that be up in Ottawa, said, if we tell the people that they have the right to do this, we will lose all of our wealth and all of our power. So we cannot tell them the truth. So they lied. But they're cunning. So whilst they lied for the next few years, they also created Section 148 to be inserted into the British North American Act. Now, Section 148 would have given them all of the power and none of the power for the people. And so they sent a delegate in 1937 over to England to have the English inserted in quietly. And the English said, we ain't going to commit international fraud. Don't be ridiculous. Go back to Canada and tell the people the truth and hold a constitutional convention. And they didn't. They just went, nothing really. So the money, and this is kind of funny because I have money from 1937 which says Dominion of Canada on it. 1938 it just says Canada. So they quit calling it the Dominion of Canada because the jig was up. And so in the 1930s we were going through what they call the dirty 30s. If any of us were alive back then. My parents grew up during that timeline. And it was basically hand to mouth. Either if you were super wealthy, like today, if they were super wealthy, you didn't have to worry. If you weren't, then you worked to put food on the table, and that was all you did. And you worked 12, 14, 16-hour days, 7 days a week to do that during that timeline. It was terrible, both here in Canada and the US and throughout the rest of the world. And so people were far more busy feeding themselves, keeping a roof over their heads than they were in politics. And so a lot of dirty dealings were done back then where the people couldn't and weren't paying attention. And by the way, the bankers did that. They made that on purpose, so that the people were kept very busy. And then just to cap things off, they said, hey, let's start a world war. So they did. Bankers support both sides of every war. They gave money to Hitler and his people, England, anyway, so they started a world war. We lost, once again, a whole generation of young men on both sides. And it was terrible. And it was all for cover, because they wanted the people to remain ignorant and not know what's going on. And so that's why I say in 1946, 1947, William Lyon Mackenzie King sent George Barr, the King's Counsel, along with the stenographer, down to Montreal to depose Russell Rogers Smith to find out how bad they were screwed. Now, you can download, I have the PDF of that deposition on the Mythos Canada website under the Russell Rogers Smith tab. It's there, you can read it, it's a really good read. He gets into explaining the different clauses that were placed into the Statute of Westminster, what the real meaning is, not what the attorneys would like you to believe they are, or the politicians would like you to believe they are, but the truth of what they really are. And it's, you know, it's like, it really is eye-opening to find out how badly we've been bamboozled. But also in 1946, the King of England, working outside of his constitutional monarchy, appointed his buddy, Alexander of Tunis, to be the Governor General of Canada. Now, the Parliament over there said, we're never going to send another Governor General. But the King said, oh, here's another Governor General. Well, wait a minute, King. You're a constitutional monarchy. You can't do that. You have to have agreement from your Parliament in order to do that. You can't work alone. But he worked alone. Whoa. Oh. So then he also said to the Parliament of Canada, set up a commission to write some letters patent for my Governor General. And they did. And then he said to William Lyon Mackenzie King, if I sign that, I'll go to the gallows here in England, so you sign on my behalf. And William Lyon Mackenzie King signed on his behalf. So Alexander of Tunis did one thing in 1948, just one thing. The letter patent. But here's what he gave Royal Assent. Bill 338. Bill 338. You know what that bill is for? Bill 338, you know what that is?
No.
The Income Tax Act.
Oh,
The Income Tax Act.
oh, bring it on.
Yeah, that's what he did. Yeah, and guess how many pages it is? 3. 3 pages. But the Income Tax Act today, I believe it's 1,500 pages now. Well, so King Georgie drops dead, and his daughter, Queen Elizabeth, she comes to power. And she, like her daddy, working outside of the constitutional monarchy, decides that she wants the Canadian Parliament to write an act for her to become the Queen in right in Canada. So she had them write the Royal Styles and Titles Act and pass it. What is the Royal Styles and Titles Act? The Royal Styles and Titles Act said, I, the Queen of England, declare myself to be the Queen and right of Canada. That's it. That's it. No heirs, no successors, just that. One paragraph. And what's interesting about this, it has no heirs and successors. Which means that when she drops dead, there is no queen, there is no king in right. There is no king in right of Canada. There are no successors. So where do we get Chucky being the king in right of Canada? We don't. There are no heirs and successors. He's a usurper. He's a fraud. And by the way, where does she have her power? Oh no, she did. Had to go to the Oceans Act, 8-1. The Queen and Right of Canada has jurisdiction on the seabed, or all land under water.
C to C.
Anyway, I'm just going to bounce. We're going to go to 1976, because 1976, there was a big kerfuffle in Quebec. And the Parti Québécois and Mr. René Lévesque, landslide victory in Quebec, based on what? Separation, referendum, separation. So, Walter Cool, by the way, this letter is up on the website, and you can download it for your reading enjoyment, sends this very famous letter to René Lévesque. And René Lévesque says, Mr. Lévesque, you cannot have a divorce without first having a marriage. Canada has never confederated, and we do not have a constitution. You are free to leave anytime you want. Well, Lévesque isn't a stupid man. When he goes to Ottawa, and he gives this letter to Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, that is. Trudeau reads it. Lévesque says, well, is it true? And he says, yes, of course it's true. You can leave anytime you want. But, here's the deal. Anytime you say to Ralph that you're going to hold a referendum for separation, we're going to double and sometimes triple, well, it depends what you negotiate, the transfer payments. And you're going to get very wealthy. The rest of Canada gets screwed, but you're going to get very wealthy. So he shut up and he went back to Quebec. And to this day, Quebec gets more transfer payments than any other province here in Canada. Because of so,
There we go.
oh yeah, in 1981, and I had Peter, what was his name? Peter from Newfoundland. He did a roundtable with the premier. Not Loki, yeah. Anyway, so I did a roundtable with him in Peckford. Brian, not Peter. Brian Peckford. Interesting guy. So here's what they did in 1981. Trudeau, in his infinite wisdom, says, we're going to get all the premiers from all the provinces. We're going to get them in Ottawa. And we're going to write an act. We're going to call it a constitution, but we know it's not. We're going to get the premiers who have been elected as people's representatives so that it looks like we're getting a representation of the people, which they're not, of course, because the premiers got their job with 10% or 12% or 15% or 25% of the vote, not 100% of the vote. So there was no representation of the people by any of the premiers to come and do this. And so they got there and they put this show on that they're writing this Constitution Act, right? And they're going to go to England. The reality of it was, so they did this, and like Brian Peckford said, they all left at a certain point, except one guy. One guy didn't leave. And I bet you can guess who that was. It was Mr. René Lévesque. He did not trust the Liberals as far as he could throw them. So he stuck around after all the other premiers left. He's sitting there, and he tried to get into the secret meeting these buggers had behind closed doors, and they threw him out. They literally brought the security, they flipped him up, they walked him out, they dropped him on the curb and told him to go back to Quebec. Well, they rewrote the act. Oh yeah. What Peckford and the other premiers had written was very similar. They didn't make too big changes. There was a lot of wordsmithing. And the one thing that they made sure that they did was put in the notwithstanding clause. And I've said this, I talked to so many different politicians. I said, could you please show me another country in the world that has a notwithstanding clause in its constitution? There isn't one. You know what a notwithstanding clause is? It suspends the Constitution. It suspends the the thing that creates the government.
Yeah.
So that they can do whatever heck they want. So, how wonderful is that? Plus, if you understand what the charter is, what a charter is, it is actually what you do when you charter a ship at sea. That's what you're doing. You're creating a corporate entity known as a charter for a ship at sea, which is what they did here. Okay, so this is a maritime jurisdictional document that has no applicability to men or women. It belongs only to the fiction. So, but you would think that these people would be smart enough to at least get it properly ratified, right? No. This is the proclamation from 1982, right? It's a proclamation. So here it says, and whereas Section 58 of the Constitution Act 1982 set up Schedule B to the Canada Act, provides that the Constitution Act 1982 shall, this is the big important part, subject to Section 59 thereof, come into force on a day to be fixed by a proclamation issued under the Great Seal of Canada. Well, if you go to Section 58, takes you to 59, takes you to 23.1a. 23.1a is to either be bilingual or not. Guess what province didn't sign off? Quebec. To repeal Section 23.1a would have made bilingualism gone. So Quebec never signed. So the second proclamation of the Great Seal of Canada never came about to this day. That document has never been ratified. And in January of 2022, in Quebec, Justine Trudeau said, the Constitution Act 1982 doesn't apply to the federal government because of the Quebec problem. And he's 100% correct. It's the first time a politician ever told the truth. Doesn't apply. Why? Because it's never been ratified. They have no standing in law. Period. So, now we're going to get into something a little more fun. Let's see. So, I got so much paper.
That's great.
Here we go. So, here in Canada, between 1982 and 1985, they did something with what we know as the provinces today. They incorporated them as sub-corporations to the parent corporation. And you can go on to Dun & Bradstreet and look them up. The province of Alberta, province of Saskatchewan, they're all on Dun & Bradstreet, and they all have corporate filings, et cetera, et cetera. So, they have, in the Interpretations Act, I'll read you some definition, just for fun. So, how do they define? Now the Interpretations Act is the highest definition you can use of any words used in their statutes, et cetera, in government issued paper. Okay? Not Black's Law Dictionary, not any other law dictionary or any common dictionary. Interpretations Act is the highest authority for that. So they say the definition of Canada for greater certainty includes the internal waters of Canada and the territorial seas. As one knows with the maxims in law, the inclusion of one is exclusion of all others. What is Canada? The internal waters and external seas. What is the Canadian government? Maritime jurisdiction. So they have three definitions of province. This is so much fun. First definition means the province of Prince Edward Island. Second definition, when used as meaning a part of Canada other than Prince Edward Island, here's that wonderful word again, includes the Northwest Territories, the Yukon Territory, and Nunavut Territory. Must be the third definition that we have. See. The province means the province of Canada and includes the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. Well, where's Ontario, Quebec? We're not provinces. We're sub-corporations of the parent. Ain't that wild?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, let's get into a few definitions. I figure we'll have some fun tonight with some definitions, just because I like definitions as well. And I like the words. Allodial. Anybody here know what allodial? Have you heard the word allodial or inallodial? So it means free, not holden of any lord or superior, owned without obligation of vassalage or fealty, the opposite of feudal. What's interesting is, here in Canada, as in the United States, in Canada we have what they call crown patents. In the United States they call them land patents. Land patent, or crown patent, is a allodial title to the land under your feet. And I simplify it to mean that you own it from the soles of your feet to the center of the earth, from the top of your head to the other reaches of the atmosphere. It is yours and yours alone, period. And you can update a crown patent or a land patent in the US because they are living documents. They are as alive today as they were when they were first written in the 18th and 1700s. How do we know that? Because there are 4 words within the document that said heirs and assigns, and the key word, and I've had this, to ask an attorney this one once, how do you define forever? He told me to get the F out of his office. Yes.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, how do you define forever?
Mm-hmm.
I said it's alive today as it was when it was first written. No, it's not. It's just a historical document. Really, how do you define forever? Get the F out of my office. So these were, and we do this here in Canada. I've been working with people from across Canada to help people do this for several years now. And it's here in Ontario, there's quite a lot. The first ones written in Ontario were written in the 1790s. Likewise in British Columbia, all the way through the last crown patent written in Canada was in October of 1930. So, what's interesting here is in the B&A Act, Section 109, property in lands and mines, etc. Okay. And it says all lands, mines, minerals, and royalties belonging to the several provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, at the Union, and all sums then due or payable for such lands, mines, minerals, and royalties shall belong to the several provinces of Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, in which same or situate or rise, subject to any trust existing in respect thereof, and any interest other than that of the province of the same. So, to any interest other than that of the province of the same, they're talking about land patents. That's where they recognize crown patents, under B&A. Interesting, huh? Sorry, I missed it.
Hey, Dad,
We,
pre-Crown, pre-Confederation, we would call it Confederation.
There's no confederation.
Pre-1867 then.
Yeah.
Crown patents, Crown land patents were issued by King George III himself in Ontario.
Well, they were never issued by the king.
Mine are issued by the king, signed by the king, issued by the king, terms of the king on the land.
Really, I'd love to see them.
I have. And
I've
they're
never
very-
seen them signed by a king.
Yeah, they're very distinctive because all the king reserves the rights to in this area
Well, usually it's the king's representative that
Is-
signs it.
is white pine.
Yeah.
White pine tree right to do an easement on the property if needed.
Yeah.
Other than that, they transfer from one owner to the next owner to the next owner. What we found, if you look at case law, they actually supersede Canadian law because they're pre-1867. Anything after 1867 is treated as the same as the province, the municipal, and the federal government had jurisdiction over that land.
Section 129.
Yes. Exactly.
But as you can see in section 119 of the DNA Act, they also recognize separately the from that time, from that.
Yeah, in Ontario, in this area here, the first crown patent was issued in 1800. After,
1791.
actually,
1790, I get it.
did you?
I actually have that problem.
Okay, the only one we have is 1800, the earliest.
1790.
Because
And
they,
93. I
because
did
they
one from
seized
93.
all this area in 1783, after they moved to sign the Williams Treaty.
So,
Yep.
we got a little sidetracked here. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more tonight about something called the de facto doctrine. Okay? And this is what the government here in Canada today is running under, the de facto doctrine. They know it. They hope we don't know it, because when we know it, then the only solution to that problem is we have to hold a constitutional convention, elect our delegates, and write our own constitution, and we solve the problem. So, what is a de facto? What does it mean? In Latin, it means in fact, often used in place of actual to show that the court will treat as a fact authority being exercised or an entity acting as if it had authority, even though the legal requirements have not been met. De facto means existing but not by law. And a definition of the de facto doctrine, this is really interesting. The de facto doctrine is a rule or principle of law which, in the first place, justifies the recognition of the authority of governments established and maintained by persons who have usurped the sovereign authority of the people. And secondly, which recognizes the existence of and protects from collateral attack public or private bodies, corporate, which through illegally organized yet under color of law openly exercises the powers and functions of regularly created bodies. What does that mean? Well, that means that every ministry that was created under the Ontario government, under the federal government, are illegal corporate entities that are designed to do what? To steal the wealth of the people, period. The de facto doctrine is in section 15 of Canada's Criminal Code. An offense to de facto law. No person shall be convicted of an offense in respect of an act or omission in the obedience to law from the time being made and enforced by persons in de facto possession of the sovereign power in and over the place where the act or omission occurs. You all understand what that means? Okay. So, du jour, and I use the word du jour. In Latin, it means of the law. The term has come to describe lawful legal control of a state or a corporation. Cool, eh? And that's what we, the people, need to understand, that we, the people, have the right to do just that.
Yeah.
This is why I go on the road and I teach this stuff. Because not only is it a lot of fun, and I get to meet some wonderful people, so I'm sure I got this covered here. Okay.
It's much needed. Yes, sir.
So government does disguised expropriation would be the same thing of people's properties and assets. And you're familiar with disguised expropriation done by government, not expropriation, disguised expropriation.
So, one of the things we need to understand, I didn't really hear what you said.
Oh,
I'm just gonna move on to this, and we'll come back to it.
okay.
I wanted to, so, people, in order to have a sovereign nation, in Ottawa, for example, today, if you read the Constitution Act 1982, Constitution Act 1867, there is no clause in there allowing them land under their feet. If you go to the US Constitution, you will see that there are 10 square miles that were donated by Maryland and Virginia that allowed for the creation of Washington, D.C. If you go into the German Constitution, you'll find that the Reichstag, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, in Germany sits on land that was given to the government to allow for sovereignty. And likewise, Denmark, in England, there's documents showing that the monarch has its land, et cetera, et cetera. And that's in a lodium, or a lodial title. And it gives the ability for the power of the federal government to have eminent domain. What's eminent domain? Ooh, there's a interesting. Eminent domain, the unrestricted ownership of land independent of all action from without and paramount over all action within. The right to exercise the power of eminent domain is inherent in sovereignty, necessary to it, and inseparable from it. It is part of sovereign power of any nation. Instead, we have, from the Interpretations Act of Canada, for greater certainty includes the eternal waters and territorial seas of Canada. Hello?
Sounds familiar.
What? What sovereign nation? As they said to Mr. Trudeau when he went to get a seat on the Security Council a couple of years ago, go back to the landmass commonly known as Canada and de facto govern it, but you do not get a seat on the Security Council, you're not a sovereign nation.
That's right.
Ottawa pays a fee every year to the First Nation.
$2.7 million for leasing.
Yes, for leasing that land to everyone. Part of the building zone.
Did we hear that right?
I'm telling you, Ottawa pays $2.7 million to First Nations in order to have legal right to have the parliament buildings on their land.
No.
So, I'll give you a quick example of something. So the Income Tax Act was created in 1948. And because nobody said anything, and by the way, they have to put them in the Hansard for 30 days. And if there are no complaints for 30 days from the Hansard, then they become part and parcel of their color of law, statute. But if there's one complaint, they have to pull it from the Hansard, deal with the complaint, and then redo it for 30 days. So if 1 million people complain once, they would have to resolve that complaint. But if 1 million people complain for 1 million days, that law would never pass.
So you need to do this within 30 days.
Within the 30-day window that they put it in, that they put it, because they give the opportunity to the people to complain. Anyway.
Is that before it's consent?
Yeah, before, well, actually, they give it royal assent,
Mhm.
then they Hansard it. And if nobody complains, then it takes its place in the annals of color of law. So all is built upon fraud and illegal deception. If you don't call them on it, they will build upon it. And that's why I'm saying the Income Tax Act went from 3 pages to over 1,500 pages today. It has been built because nobody stood up and said, wait. Okay.
So I'm coming back to this, then there's a prime opportunity right now that
Oh, yeah.
when they
So-
change the income tax, to collect 6 to 7% on estate sale, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or just stop fucking paying income tax. So, who runs everything here in Canada? Who runs it all? Do you know who runs it? Is it the secret society, the Masons, the Illuminati, think of it, the Bohemian Grove? Oh, is it all these people that run it from behind the, are they? No, no, my friend. No. They don't run anything. You want to know who runs it? Super simple, and they don't do it from behind closed doors. They do it right out in the open. You know what the Law Society of Ontario is?
Fraud.
You know what it is? It's a PMA, non-statutory PMA. What is a non-statutory PMA? It means that it's not controlled by the statutes or registered with the government of Ontario.
Oh.
The Law Society of Canada, same thing. The attorneys run everything. The law societies is their hiding place, their hiding holes. The attorneys, if you go to any part of any ministry of the government, they have a legal department.
Yes,
Every single one. When they write any of their statutes, who writes it?
lawyers.
So, who runs the whole system here in Canada?
Lawyers.
The law societies and the attorneys. No, there are no lawyers in Canada. I'm a lawyer. I am knowledgeable of the law, which is land, law of the land. An attorney is a man who practices color of law, or a woman who practices color of law, but is also delivers the person or its property onto the state. The legal term for that. So, when we're going out there and you're doing your conspiracy theory this and conspiracy theory that, and how the Illuminati are doing this, and how the Masons and the good Masons and the bad Masons and the this and that, and the Bohemian Grove, and you know, the Trilateral Commission and all these other stuff. Yeah, they're involved, but who is the masters? The Law Society, the Law Society, the Law Society. So you have the Canadian Law Society and the Provincial Law Society. They're all PMAs, they're all non-statutory, and they create the bureaucracy, and they are the problem. They're not the solution. There's an old joke from the 1970s, 1980s. What do you call 500 lawyers at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean? A good start. What was it that,
The other one is you got one lawyer in town, he stars, put two in there, they both get rich.
They don't all know this, though, do they?
Oh,
no, of course not. Those at the top know it.
yes.
Those that sit behind the on the board, they all know. They're all been read in. They don't want to. They will be the ones that are going to fight you when you put on a constitutional convention. They're the ones that are going to want to be elected to be part of the writing of the Constitution. Those are the ones that you need to ban. You have to ban all attorneys, all judges, and all employees, former employees of the government from being part and parcel of elected or appointed officials for writing the Constitution. They have to be banned. Now, one more thing before I put an end to all of this. This one is, I came across this quite a few months ago now, probably a year ago. And this is really interesting. It's called the precautionary principle. Anybody ever heard of a precautionary principle?
No.
It's what Trudeau uses when he climate drifts. So they know that carbon dioxide does not cause global warming. They know that it's a byproduct of global warming, not the causation. But if it has 100 billion millionth of a percent possible, they create laws called precautionary principle. And they use it in healthcare, even though there's no such thing as a virus, proven no such thing as a virus. But just in case, we're going to write laws under the precautionary principle that, just in case, even if it's 100 trillion, quadrillion of a percent possibility, precautionary principle kicks in. And they do it across the board. This is something that is done quietly, behind the scenes, where most people aren't paying attention. And that's the sad part about it. But this is something that you guys need to look up and get fully involved in. If you're going to be tipping at windmills, you guys went after your municipal government.
Mhm.
Damn, bravo, good for you. You've got to stop them in their tracks. You've got to put them in their place. And I've said, I've worked with people all across Canada. I said, they're your public servants. They serve you, the public. You're the
Yeah.
taxpayer. You know what they used to call you before they called you taxpayer? You know how they got away with collecting taxes back in the day? Because back in the day, in the 1700s and 1800s, you know what they used to call you?
Slaves?
No,
No.
no. Ratepayers. Ratepayers, R-A-T-E payers.
And they still call you that on property tax, ratepayers.
Exactly.
Yes.
Mm.
And it just, these people are evil incarnate.
Yes.
Unalien, okay, let's do one more thing. Unalienable. Sorry, guys.
No, that's great. Keep bringing it in.
Don't be ever sorry.
No, I'm sorry for the delay.
There's no delay.
We're
This
just
is
soaking it all in
This
here.
is interesting because so the Crown in Chancery, the first Department of Land that the world has known was housed at Whitehall, where it is today. The Lord High Chancellor is the custodian of the sovereignty of England. In other words, he holds the allodial title to the land. All lands are under him and his jurisdiction, and their retention as assets of the nation is his responsibility. Isn't that interesting? Because you would think that the King of England would have the land, and they don't. As a matter of fact, this is held on behalf of the people, not on the monarch. Years and years and years ago, it was done quietly that all the lands that were held by the king or the queen were transferred then onto the Crown and Chancery. Now, the Crown and Chancery, which is really interesting for the British Empire, held all the land in Canada up until December 11th, 1931. On December the 12th, 1931, all that land was then given to the provinces, but on to the people, because corporations, or as all governments are, it doesn't matter whether you're common law or maritime, what have you, or corporations, the people have to be the allodial title holder. And so when you join the Memphis Canada on Facebook, I have a question. Who are the allodial title holders of the land here in Canada? The answer to that question is we, the people.
Mhm.
And they needed us to have the land in order for us to hold a constitutional convention to give the federal government land under its feet for eminent domain. So, unalienable, inalienable,
Inalienable rights.
and so, how many people here have human rights? Show of hands. Human rights? You have human rights? Civil rights? Do we have civil rights?
Bill of Rights.
No. Human.
Human rights.
The hue of man. Hue of man. And you look it up and it says monster.
Right. Yeah.
Well said, my wife.
It says monster. So what does that mean? Monster. A human being by birth, but in some part resembling a lower animal, a monster, hath no inheritable blood, and cannot be heir to any land, albeit it be bought forth in marriage. You have no property rights if you claim to have human rights. You've given up your body.
Trickery.
It is trickery.
Look at t-shirts.
So,
Oh, there you go.
That's wild.
Declaration of Human Rights by the UN. And within it, they have this wonderful thing called inalienable rights. Oh, I have inalienable rights. It's in the Declaration of Human Rights. Well, let's see. It says rights which are not capable of being surrendered or transferred without the consent of the one possessing them. Wait a minute.
Who's possessed?
Well, you're possessed of your inalienable rights, but you can give them up. Boom. according to the Declaration of Human Rights, you can. That's inalienable, but how about unalienable? Incapable of being alienated, that is sold or transferred, unalienable. The state of a thing or right which cannot be sold, things which are not in commerce as public roads are in their natural, or their nature unalienable. Some things are unalienable in consequence of particular provisions in law forbidding their sale or transfer, as pensions granted by the government. The natural rights of life and liberty are unalienable. The natural rights of life and liberty are unalienable. Life and liberty are unalienable. In other words, they're God-given. The only one that can take them from you is God. And God comes along at some point in your life and says, I'm about to take your unalienable rights away from you. And you die.
You're dead.
But if somebody lower tries to take on you, can shoot them, and you're good.
There you go. We get so lost. And I saw the shocked look on your face. You thought you had human rights. And it's, but that's what I'm saying, is that they con you into believing. And it sounds so wonderful. The reality is, it's to steal your labor. Because it's the most valuable commodity known to man. It's more valuable than gold because your labor gets the gold out of the ground. It's more valuable than anything, your labor. So, how do they tax you? They know you have unalienable rights, and they know that your life is an unalienable, which means that your labor is unalienable. So how do they tax you? They create a legal fiction that you believe is you. They know that they can't infringe upon your unalienable rights of life and liberty, which is also your labor. So they trick you into believing that you're the fiction that pays the taxes. It really is that simple.
It is that simple.
It's silly simple.
It's kiss simple.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they're not a bunch of geniuses. And they interbred with each other over the centuries. And they have some, I mean, you look at Charlie marrying his first cousin. And he wanted to do that prior to Diana. But his mother said, no way, we ain't getting moronic kids of you breeding with your sister, basically. You know, and she's a horse-faced, ugly wolf. But you look at Charlie's kids, and you look at Diana's handlers that she had, boy, do they look like him more than they look like Charlie.
Oh, like they always said Charlie's queer.
No, he's married to that, anyway.
Married, but it doesn't mean he doesn't.
Doesn't. Anyways, I'm not gonna get into his sexuality, it's not my business. But, so that's really it, kind of in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, tonight. I think I overextended my time here a little bit.
No, you didn't.
No, you're good. Now we're gonna go back to the.
I wanted to go back to your question before.
Okay, I wanna deal with three things.
Hold on a second.
What's your position on the Bill of Rights that was put in 1960 under DPA?
It doesn't apply to you, it applies to persons, it doesn't apply to me. So it's a worthless piece of garbage.
So how does it get argued in the Supreme Court and stand in the Supreme Court in rulings on behalf of arguments?
Okay, that's all well and good, but look who they're arguing. Once again, well, let's go back to the beginning. On the driver's license that you have in your pocket, is that you, the man, or is it the fiction?
Fiction.
Great, is it a person?
No.
Yeah,
Yes.
Well, it's not me.
it is you're a man, you're not a person. A person
Definition.
is a corporation, or a legal fiction.
But I would argue.
So if you read the Bill of Rights, and right at the very beginning of the Bill of Rights, it says this applies to persons.
You need to know
Doesn't apply to
What
you.
you need to do is actually challenge jurisdiction.
Yeah,
That's what
jurisdiction.
I'm trying to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to challenge jurisdiction, that's what it's all about. They have no jurisdiction, so why would you allow them to have jurisdiction over you? You have to challenge it.
But it's the same as why people have to pay taxes.
No, you don't have to pay
If you have a
taxes.
mortgage, if you have a mortgage on your property,
Yes,
if you
the
don't
corporate-
pay, if
the
you don't keep your
corporations-
taxes in good standing,
yes, I understand
then
how
your
it works.
loan can be pulled,
I understand how it works.
Yes.
And I understand that when you look at the mortgage, and I've had people do this, you look at the mortgage, under the Bill of Exchange Act, the lender signs on the left and the borrower signs on the right, correct?
Correct.
So, you have mortgage, lender, your line promissory note, lender, borrower. If you go look at your mortgage, you've signed on the left. Both of them. You are the lender. The bank doesn't sign on the right.
So
That mortgage is null and void.
So what happens to a private lender? So it's
Well,
private
that's
money.
different, and that's different.
That's what I asked. Private money.
Under private money, if the lender actually signs on the left, both the promissory note and then you're bound.
Correct.
But if you go to the Royal Bank and take a mortgage,
Yeah.
you'll find that the bank has no signature on that mortgage at all.
At all.
You're the lender.
There's one thing.
And you can challenge that, by the way, and beat it.
Okay, and you don't want to stop paying taxes. What you want to do is you want to draw them to the table and ask questions. So hold it a second, I'm only going to pay the taxes. I'm only going to get some questions answered here, right? You know, you just gotta strategically draw them in. And they are obligated to answer all your questions.
So, again, Doug, if we go back to the very beginning, who owns the land in Canada?
We
By
the
law.
people.
No, we'll
If you
go
look at,
back farther.
let's go back right to the very beginning where there was one continent on the face of the earth.
Yes.
And there was one continent, there were 3 skeletal structures, we know that, Mongoloid, Caucasoid, and Negroid. We know that through continental shift, that oil is abiotic, and the earth continues to make it. Why? Because it's called continental drift that's happening today. It even happens today. So, in the eastern part of what we know as North America today, they found Caucasoid skeletal structure. Right up to the Rocky, or beyond the Rocky Mountains. As a matter of fact, if you go into Kennewick Man goes back 15,000 years as a Caucasoid skeletal structure. The native population on the west coast is Mongoloid skeletal structure 3,500 years back. Well, how did a Caucasoid skeletal structure get here if it started in Mesopotamia? Did he swim through the Mediterranean and across the Atlantic Ocean to be here? No. One continent. Who owns the land? We, the people. All of us, every single human being on planet Earth owns the land of planet Earth. Period. We, the people. Now, what do we do in order to secure our land rights? We create governments to secure our land right for the people, all of the people. And I've said this to what we call the native population. I've said this to the Aboriginal population. I've said this to the immigrant population. We, the people, create the government that secures our land rights with borders. Why? Because when we take the land and we improve the land and bring it into a value system, then we need the borders. Why? Because if we have open borders, then our land isn't secure and our rights are not secure. And that is very important. That's why we have borders. And that's why you have fences around your property. Why? To keep people that would usurp the value of your land. So when it comes right down to it, who owns the land? We, the people. That simple. And I include everybody in that statement. Period. There's nobody higher, nobody lower. We are all at the table, equal.
So, sorry,
Go ahead, you
I just
guys.
want to add to that.
Yep.
You will find the evidence on the very first page of the Bible, chapter 1, Genesis 1.
Chapter 20, chapter 1, verse 26. God created man, and God created man in his own image. And God gave man dominion over the earth. All that creepeth across its surface, flieth in its skies, and swimmeth in its oceans. Dominion. Caretakers of the land.
So again, you're gonna use that argument, it's like trapping the courts into, we swear in the Bible, you believe in the Bible, you believe in the practice of the Bible. Therefore, then you believe in what argument then I'm putting forward, where we the people own the land, then you have no jurisdiction over our land.
Well, the government already doesn't have jurisdiction over the land. They already know that. That's why they're maritime jurisdiction. They even say we look at Canada as the internal waters and the external seas.
I know what I'm saying.
The Queen and Right of Canada, because she's on the seabed.
Your first battle is what he's saying is you gotta challenge jurisdiction.
Challenge
Yeah,
jurisdiction.
that's what we're
You can
doing.
make, like, when you're going into court,
Yeah.
if you say you're being charged with something, like right now, September 26th, March 23rd, whatever, there's this court case coming up in Belleville. When you go into the court, before the trial even takes place, there's a flurry of, there's a flurry of motions that can take place. Meaning I can file one motion after another, I'm getting my position later. But that's what I'm gonna be doing when I go into court. There's gonna be multiple motions. The first one's gonna be challenging jurisdiction, right? And there's a bunch of other ones, right? But you just gotta play in their game to a certain degree, and I've tried not to play in their game, right? By doing certain things like saying, hey, look, I have my birth certificate up in court one time, actually, it's on my website. And I said, oh, so that's not my name on the docket, okay? Who writes their names in all capital letters? That's a debased form of writing called doglat, right? And he shot me down, the judge doesn't know all this, or whatever.
He's not gonna accept.
Yeah, they're all brainwashed or
Yeah.
whatever, and this is a judge just retired too, so he's been on the bench for like 30 years. But this is the shit that we're faced with, right? So, I tried, and actually right from the very first appearance, I was already threatened, thrown in jail, so I gotta be careful, you're walking on a thin line with these people, so you gotta play their game to a certain degree. I try not to, try to step out of it, and then when you start getting thrown in jail, I don't wanna go to jail, because I'm not gonna be able to fight them in jail, right? So it's like, you gotta be careful. It depends on the judge too, right? And they're all, right, a lot of them are brainwashed, some will listen, some won't. But if you bring the information to them, and it's like, this guy's got a point, right? So that's why you wanna use their own shit against them.
That's what we do. But you're coming up in front of worship, is it PA church?
What, let me say one more thing before you go.
Well, it's a judge.
Red Sash?
It's a judge.
First of all, let me say one more thing. You're up against one thing. You're up against the Law Society.
Yeah.
That's who you're fighting. So if you're gonna fight the Law Society, then go after the Law Society and quit, excuse my language, quit fucking around in the courtroom where they can bamboozle you. Go after them properly.
All right.
Okay, let's
Okay,
find out.
Doug, if that's your advice, okay, so how do you get the Law Society and then hold them accountable then?
Honestly, I have a freaking clue. And the reason for that is I haven't looked into it.
Okay.
I haven't looked into it, so that's why I don't have a freaking clue.
So,
But if I was in your position, that's what I would be looking
that's
at,
fine, you know
not playing around and doing that.
Okay, that's fine. And, there's other people out there that are doing certain things, and you know what? We all gotta try our own avenue. You know what? And, there's success in some of the things that you do. You gotta try, that's the only way you're gonna learn. But at the end of the day, the worst fear is, there's knowledge out here. Like, we just got a bunch of knowledge here today. The more knowledge you gather, that's their worst fear. Is when people start standing up and they start testing them, because we're all gonna learn different stuff. We're gonna go into the courtroom and they're gonna, try different things, and it's gonna really be different. You're gonna be coming at them at different angles.
So I'm ahead of you, I'm in court on this week, July 18th, okay? And I'm back in court on July 29th on a free trial.
What's the charge?
Oh, I caught the city stealing $100 million. So they charged me with, they started with 35 charges. They first gave me that I can't attend, so they put a no trespass order on it. Because I approved in council, we kept asking just a very question, show us your authority. Show us your authority, right?
Okay, this is it.
Yeah.
Alright.
And that's.
Okay, so, right now, we're gonna go to, Q&A, actually, we've already started. So, type in your questions, hey, if you actually wanna get on here.
Oh,
we
no,
have
I'll
people
do,
upstairs.
yeah.
Yeah, we have, the people on Zoom, so they'll wanna, obviously, they got questions, I can see why, because this information is
Did you have one more?
Speak about
to
the
go?
myth.
I thought we did two, but not the
Oh,
third.
it was on disguised expropriation by a municipality.
Yeah.
That was the one. If you're familiar with that.
Yeah, yeah. They call, funny enough, I saw this out in Saskatchewan, this poor gentleman, they came after him for eminent domain, under eminent domain. And I'm like, wait a minute, they don't have eminent domain, but it's what you call disguised
Disguised expropriation.
expropriation. Thank you very much.
Yes.
But that's what they did, and they expropriated his land. They called it eminent domain, and I'm like, wait a minute. They don't have eminent domain, the province of Saskatchewan doesn't have, municipality doesn't have it, federal government doesn't have it, how can they take your land?
There is 7 Supreme Court decisions against the municipalities.
Yep.
That they had to pay the property owner millions and millions of dollars in compensation, right?
So this is one thing for everyone to that's online and watching this video, is to look up about disguised expropriation, because a lot of this is happening right now.
Yeah.
And this is part of their land grab, this is part of, this is so much is going on right now, so as Doug has been sharing, there's definitely the myth is happening. So we need to find out more about this and educate ourselves. Come on to our Zoom meetings every Monday at 7 p.m. And we're also at 3900 Highway 35, just north of Lindsay, okay? Back to you, Doug. Thank you so much, it's been great.
Yeah,
All right.
questions?
You can go online and ask see what, some questions that people have asked. Well, actually, Bernice says, so what is the solution? We want to know.
Well,
So,
the solution is quite simple. It's by getting together and organizing within your community a constitutional committee, and then working within that community to teach yourselves what you're going to need to write a constitution and elect or appoint delegates. Now, if you go to the Myth is Canada, under Constitutional Committee, there's a pull-down tab there that has, I wrote a book that explains how to create that committee and what that committee does, and how to write a constitution. And there's all kinds of further information there on what types of constitutions are out there, et cetera, what types of laws, the different jurisdictions, also the types of money that you would want to, you might create. The 3 elements of sovereignty: land under your feet, the ability to raise a military, and the ability to create money. So those are the 3 elements of sovereignty when you're putting together a sovereign nation. And you're going to have to include that in your constitution, so please understand how to do that. All the information is there. It's a lot of reading, yes, I know, but at the end of the day, you have to self-educate, because these people will certainly subvert you and try to infiltrate you and take away your ability to give yourself the freedom that you deserve. And that's the sad part of that. So, Bernice, was it?
yes, yes, it was. Thanks, thank you so much.
Just want to say, I
Come
can't
on, stand
emphasize,
up over here in front of the camera.
just, I want to emphasize, people getting together. We gotta get together, like, the numbers have to be bigger. We need to start forming groups and, like, if you're gonna tackle some kind of case or whatever, you need to get people to split up in groups. Let's tackle this, let's tackle that, let's tackle this. And the other thing was, we need to, find out about the land, patent. Like, it's really simple process. You can.
Crown
you don't
grant.
even- Yeah, the crown patents, you don't even have to pay for it at the beginning, you can call
Crown Land Registry.
get the information.
Well, actually, you go
Send
beyond that, you go to the, here at Peterborough, you got the Minister of Natural Resources, and they give you the
That's what they
certified
issue.
copy.
Yeah.
But you get them online now, because they don't actually have the office open, so screw up right in.
Anyway, any other questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Ooh, cool. I got a point.
Okay, hold on a second. Yeah, go right ahead.
You know who it is.
Rick,
Yeah, sorry, I had some family issues there today. I wanted to make it back in time, but I only got back at about 8:30. But I've been doing a lot of thinking about how we can approach, like, we know all about the Bar Association being a PMA, and I get that. And we're not members, so if we started our own PMA,
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, start your own PMA. And they are not members of it. So basically, it's a Mexican standoff. Now, what I was thinking a lot about today is that under the Freedom of Information Act, it'd be kind of interesting to put that out there to them, stating where they got their authority, where they think they own land or they're infringing on our lands. Any documentation that we can muster up from them and have them respond to us in writing. Therefore, you have something tangible to go into a court of law. I don't think that they would give you anything, whether it be a treaty, whether it be constitution. Like they can't come up with any of this stuff. At least not for Kawartha Lakes.
No, but at the end of the day, why are you wanting to involve yourself with them in their de facto courts? There is no justice, there is no law, it's all color of law, it has nothing to do with you. And
True
how
enough,
they get their authority, and I'll tell you how they get their authority, and because of what you just said, you consent to their jurisdiction. That's how they gain their authority. You can go and ask them, how do you gain your authority? And to them, they're just gonna say, well, you're here in this courtroom, you've given us the authority to rule against you.
that's what I'm saying. That's why you write them and get them to produce it in black and white on paper.
They can't produce it on black and white on paper.
Doug hasn't gone.
They can't. They produce it because it's assumed, this is done through assumptive contracting. It's assumed that you read the contract, which is why you're in their courtroom. You read the Ontario Highways Act, you got yourself a driver's license. It's assumed that you've read the Ontario Highways Act, which is why you have a ticket now for speeding. Why are you, and so you've consented to their jurisdiction all the way through. By applying, to apply is to beg. To beg is to know what you're begging for. You applied for a social insurance number. You begged for that. You knew what you were doing. That's why you did it.
True enough. True enough.
And it's assumed at that point that everything going forward, and when you sign the income tax filing at the bottom, you sign under penalty of perjury. So you can't come back and say, well, you know, I think I screwed up on that. Oh, you lied to us? Well, then you're going to jail for 10 years under perjury. See, it's all done through consent.
Yeah, no, but you can send in amendments. But the bottom line is, under contractual law, either party can cancel the contract for any reason at any time.
No.
So, yeah.
Not for any reason at any time. You can cancel a contract, okay, if there is fraud within the contract at any time.
Well,
And,
that's what.
and
Yeah.
in this instance, there is fraud, but you gotta prove the fraud.
And also you consented.
But at the same time, like, okay,
Doesn't.
everybody there pretty much knows I haven't paid taxes in 2 years. Right? I just stopped paying them. So,
It's been 40.
no, but
About 38 years from now.
well, that's perfect. And I didn't learn half of this stuff up until about 10 years ago.
And ran a business this whole time.
Yeah, run business.
Yep.
Anyway, go ahead. So at the end of the day, how do you get out of this? The simple solution to this is to organize, set up a constitutional convention, get the delegates to write a constitution. And people say, well, it's going to take too long. I say, look, go back to 2012 and go back to Iceland. And Iceland arrested the bankers, arrested their government, was going to amend the Constitution. They were going to do an amendment to the Constitution.
There you go.
They looked at it, they said, we can't amend this. They tore it up. They said, we'll have a Constitutional Convention. They elected 50 delegates to come and write the Constitution. They wrote the Constitution in 2 weeks. They ratified it in 2 weeks. Took them 4 weeks to do it. That was it.
And those two other countries there that did it recently?
The Donbass in Ukraine ratified joining Russia, okay? But the UN said, oh, no, we're not going to recognize that. And Mr. Putin said, really? So under the United Nations Charter, Section 1, where it says very clearly that give people, oh, look at what it says there. It says the right to self-determination. So you're saying that Donbass doesn't have the right to self-determination, Mr. UN? Gutierrez? No, Mr. Putin, you're right. We recognize the Donbass. We recognize the Donbass. You're right. And that's how quickly that turned around. That's in the UN Declaration. So we, the people here in Canada, seat a de jure government, we have the right to self-determination as per their United Nations. What the heck are we doing? 93 years that we've been, the people, the rest of the world has been waiting. By the way, when Iceland ratified their constitution, guess what country first recognized them? The first one to recognize them was the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, the citizens of the United Kingdom lost $3.6 billion in their banking scandal. The United Kingdom was pushing the bankers and the government over there to take taxpayer money to pay back their citizens the $3.6 billion. So instead they arrested the government, arrested the bankers, wrote a new constitution, and England was the first one to recognize it. Yep, we recognize it. Oh, well, okay.
Let's take note of that.
But you know what I'm saying. Anybody else? This is always fun.
Wow, okay. Okay, let's take a look at questions we have online here.
Okay.
We have another one. How do you stop paying taxes without being arrested and lose your home?
Section 3 of the Income Tax Act, and read Section 3 and go to Section 3F and file that way. Section 3 is computation of income. Nobody reads it. You should read it. Section 3F will tell you how to file.
So basically, you pay no income. That's basically-
Still file.
Yeah,
See, you
still
only go to jail for not filing. They don't say for not paying, for not filing. Ask what's his name, David Lindsay out in British Columbia. He went to jail twice for not filing, not for not paying.
So what do you file? What do you file?
So you just file
3F.
no income.
Yeah.
Don't file it, but no income.
3F. Computation of it, 3F.
Yeah,
Zero.
that's how simple it is.
It is, and it's there in black and white. And by the way, if you've been filing any other way, they look at that as a donation, not as a mistake. Because if it was a mistake, then under penalty of perjury that you signed, you lied.
Well, what happens if you just stop paying?
You don't claim your income tax?
Well, if you're filing, and they'll wait, they usually come after you before 7 years is up. Because 7 years is the contract. And so they'll come after you, usually around the 6th to the 7th year, for non-filing, and you can go to jail for that. So the best thing for you to do if they do come after you is to file 0. Section 3F.
So yeah, if you haven't filed for 7 years,
Beyond 7 years, don't worry about it, don't file again. Because the contract is null and void. 7 years at sea, assisted by Act 1666.
So if they're taking tax off their wages.
okay, question?
Yes, then you put brackets around that when you do your filing, and that is a tax return.
Yep.
But the brackets are at what?
Everything they deducted that you're gonna put in off your W4, T4, or whatever it is, I don't know what it's called, federal fund. And you put that in, you put brackets around it at the very bottom, the tax return, the bracket. If you don't move that down into the very bottom where the tax return with brackets around it, then they'll just keep it as a donation. Thank you very much, you donated.
Otherwise, do they have to pay it back to you?
Yes, ma'am, that's why you put brackets around it. That's why you get it back.
Or they have to refund.
Watch your brackets, wherever you use them.
Who else you got? I haven't,
Anybody else?
I was the same way, I didn't file for 7 full years. Right?
Anybody else?
And they never came after me.
By the way, I do not do tax advice. This is not tax advice, ladies and gentlemen.
This is pure entertainment.
This is pure entertainment. I am not an attorney, and I do not have a bar card, and I'm not a member of the Law Society. I'm not an accountant, and I do not give tax advice.
For entertainment purposes.
It's for entertainment purposes only.
That's right.
It's your opinion.
Not even my opinion, it's other people's opinion that I've taken to give to you.
Correct.
Anyway, any other questions?
Well, I don't see any other ones online. If you do,
But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say goodnight to everybody.
yeah.
It's been wonderful, and you could shut down your camera system and we'll let you do that. Thank you very much, everybody, for having me.
Hey, that's great.
Memphis Canada, by the way, the Memphis Canada works off of donations and only donations. And so you can go to our website, there's a donation tab. Please do help us as much as you can. $5, $10, buy me a coffee is up there. However you can, we really thank you so much. Have a great
Excellent.
evening.
All right.
Thank you, Doug.
Hey, this has been a great night. You know, we want to say thank you to everyone that's been participating here, as well as online on Zoom. And we like to hear your stories. And you know where to email them to. Email them at suethem@kltpa.ca. And that stands for Kawartha Lakes Taxpayers Association. So we're here every Monday, all right, 7 p.m., 3900 Highway 35 north. That's just north of Lindsay. In the little town of Cameron. So yeah, if you'd like to participate, be part of the audience, come on here and share your testimonies, as well as you can email them so we can, read them out for you, or actually get them on Zoom. Get on Zoom, we'll share the screen and get that word out. So you know what, we need to be doing this. We need to getting together, sharing, as what Doug was saying. And as you see, there's so many myths out there. I've learned actually quite a bit tonight. It's been great. You go down so many rabbit holes. It ain't funny, and you find out everything's a lie. And especially tonight, you just did. All right. We thank you so much. We're over and out.